You have people who are desperate to be connected. The lockdowns have shown the weakness within a lot of the facilities we needed, and have highlighted that. And that's because UK PLC has not got itself together, and the large companies are making the profits out of that, to make sure there's universal access to broadband, that there is at least universal equality and digital equality there. And that's what digital quality isn't about, just digital services. It's about making sure your services are accessible in other ways. So you can't just offer a service online. It's totally unacceptable. It doesn't cater to different people's needs, and it breaches international law. So the UN Charter for People with Disabilities clearly states that disabled people have got the right to choose how they're communicated to and how they communicate. So it is something which the UK keeps on breaching, and we should be holding politicians and others to account. And those are sorts of things that WaveLength is there to do. And it's about a wider picture, which is everything is, is a web now. Everything connects. We are moving towards, even though we may be resistant to it or not understand how it's all linking together, the World Wide Web of everything. And that has particular dangers, but if we had, for example, the power of processing, which we could have in the UK quite easily, in terms of a government system which allows people to have good voice recognition on the televisions and the computing, etc. Instead of having to outsource to Amazon and Alexa and having all your data collected, you could do it anonymously. But we know, and we're shown through our research, that if you intervene the way we do through simple everyday technology, which I basically mean a television, a radio, a tablet, or smart televisions, those sorts of things, you can actually mitigate a lot of the impact, and it reduces the level of loneliness. We found actually there is a direct link, a correlative link at a very, very high level of significance. I wouldn't say with proved causation, but there's definitely a very high correlation that if you reduce loneliness in any group of people, you will increase their feeling of well-being and their feeling of health. And that itself is saving billions to the NHS. It's a positive impact for UK PLC. And we're the only organisation who's really proven that statistically. I'm aware that things like the BBC survey showed that young people were more lonely than older, and older people were reporting very clearly they were lonelier when they were younger. And maybe that's because they learned skills about social interaction, but it's obvious what you do to prevent loneliness in older age is give people, when they're younger, a skill set to deal with loneliness and understand it when they're younger. And one of the things we would like to develop, but we can't find anybody who will help, and government we've approached over this, but again, no help at all, is develop a loneliness app, which would allow people to measure and monitor their own loneliness, look at suggested interventions which can help, very simple things. You don't have to just do things online, but you can follow those interests as well. But interaction with green space and nature has been shown to be very powerful. And even if you can't go out because you're shielding, having objects such as a feather or a leaf or a stone and having a group talk over things like Zoom is a great way of doing that. Viewing pictures, looking at Google Earth, all that actually helps. and it's shown to reduce your feelings of isolation and loneliness. I think the other point of having an app is that it will help people to go back to work. There's a great fear. There's also a lot of misinterpretation about what is loneliness and what is stress. So, I think there's a lot of single parents who are kind of looking at people who are now doing home teaching, homeschooling, and saying, well, we've been here for a long time, folks, and actually doing without any support is really difficult. So, it may be driving you crazy at the moment, but at least we got the red button and BBC channels, and we got, the Oak Foundation are doing fantastic stuff, and schools are as well where they can. There's all that, and strain of losing jobs or thinking you're going to lose it or being on furlough. It's all very, very difficult. And those will underlie and build pressure and make people feel a lot lonelier. And we do have these key triggers we know about. Feeling that discrimination is happening to you is one of the biggest triggers for disabled people, particularly when it's coming from a body which you feel is one which should be supporting you. So government organisations and government bodies have really got to take account of their actions. And I sort of alluded to this some time ago when I started talking to you. We deal with very simple off-the-shelf technology because people recognise that, know how to deal with it, and there's backup and support for it. And it doesn't have to be specialised. At the moment, again, we're seeing people run past the tool shed, and this happens with mobile phones and children. You can actually set them up to be a lot safer as an adult. And the settings are there and should be activated. And I think we can, if we started looking at it as that as a more responsible way of doing it, I think we could move forward. And I think that's part of what I aim to try and get through. WaveLength has made some big changes, such as changes to the licensing system for television. So we got domestic violence refugees included, so they could get TVs without having to pay for individual TV license for each room and for each individual coming in. And when you have people who are seeking refuge, maybe for 1 or 2 nights before being moved out of county for their own safety and the children's safety, and that's both men and women, it's just impractical. So that was a big move. But we know when we're giving people a tablet, for example, we're allowing to make multiple connections, giving them control of how they really interact with people they have known, choosing a level of interaction which makes them feel secure and they don't want to be exploited or rejected again. So it's a good way of making recontact with families through either email or through a Facebook account. They can get the benefits. They can, if they've got help and support, they can find out what's happening in the world. It starts to give you a little bit of ownership and power, and somebody's bothered to give you something rather than always take something away from you. And I think all those things are very supportive, and it starts to remove that self-isolation or insulation barrier that lots of homeless people have put up because they don't want to be hurt anymore. It reintroduces a feeling of worth and that people actually care, and it allows them to start to interact with each other. So we worked with a large project where they found loneliness was the worst day of the week was Sunday. So and it was worse in the summer than it was at Christmas or the winter or any other time, because nobody really wanted to know about them. All the hostels were closed, or they were out and about on the streets there, or they had been given some accommodation, but it had been right at the other end of of London or the other end of the country from somebody they had got to know was in a sort of sheltered or hostel accommodation. And that allowed them to reconnect and make a link. allowed them to do things on, meet up and do free activities, and allowed to keep those friendship groups going. So that we saw results that people's mental health stabilised through that, and we see this when we put things into, we have. I did an interview with a group called Gateway in Bury St Edmunds, asking the Alzheimer's group, so early onset dementia, and they're all using tablets we had donated. We had a support worker there, but they were very au fait with what they're trying to watch on YouTube, and we knew that was good for reminiscence. They were doing reminiscence sessions over them. They were playing games on them, and it was helping them give structure back to the day because they would watch news on them at a certain period, and it was a one access device. And I remember one guy, I said, well, what do you think about people who say that going online and having a computer makes you lonely? Because there's all this backlash about technology, which is fortunately being misproven. And a lot of our work has gone to that. Said, if you're not online, you are lonely. I totally disagree. And this is an 85-year-old with dementia who is getting a hell of a lot out of a tablet, which he can use himself within his own bounds. And I do not wish to take that away from people. But I do wish to point out that he couldn't order his shopping online, or he could do a tax return, or contact his local government, even though he had worked for local government. So he couldn't do his housing needs or his support needs or make sure that things were coming to him during the lockdown. But he felt supported, less lonely, less isolated, and his health had improved. And I think that is really important. So you can see the benefits there. Then young people, we put tablets and other things in the back of a van for a young person's sort of homeless project soup run. And that led people into employment. It led them to get accommodation, led them to re-establish their lives. And they were getting something out of this. And this all started from tablets we had donated of playing games online. But it meant they're off the street. The health in terms of they weren't going into hospital with overdoses and drugs. They were drying out. They weren't contracting, sexual transmission diseases because they were working with prostitution. It had changed where they were, and that was, the power and the access. But it was also about friendship groups. It was also about re-establishment of trust, and it was also about the impact of the equipment. But what we do is not just about taking a very simple idea, and it is about connectivity, and it is about giving access to people to things which they can use and utilize. It's about saying you need to trust. We work as a national organisation through groups who know the current situation on the ground and make sure they're supported. And we help them with a national input because we've got a knowledge across a whole sectors of how you utilise that equipment so you develop a proper intervention. We also make sure we give them help with monitoring. So we provide them with a loneliness score when they start and after they've had the equipment. And you can see from that people are improving on their loneliness and they're improving on their health. And through the written feedback, we often find, even as people don't say they're improving, that through the scores they're giving, they're actually saying this has been a great support and help to me, and I've been able to do A, B, and C. And within sort of sectors of, domestic violence, we find there's lots of myths about domestic violence. So one of the big myths is that a lot of the domestic violence where men are concerned as single-sex domestic violence. Well, it isn't. You know, quite a bit of that is female on male, is wives on husbands who have been very enduring, as well as, you know, the wives who have had awful male partners as well. A lot of that is learned and taught behaviour at a very early age from being in domestic violence situations. A lot of it's about power and control. And it means people haven't been able to turn on the TV or watch what program or switch on the radio or go online or have a phone for any other reason for, you know, making somebody ringing up to see where they were. So we have done a number of different projects where we have provided clean devices. So tracking information gets onto phones, onto tablets, etc. And if all your data in terms of your bank accounts, your passports, your whatever, it's all on those devices, you need to transfer it off. So we did that to keep people safe. We were funded by the Cloth Workers Foundation. We could do with a hell of a lot more funding in this area again. And we also then made sure that children and refugees had access to tablets. So one of my experience of going to talk to a load of people when Angelina Jolie had just become the UN ambassador for domestic violence, a lot of the people I was talking to were saying, "What does she know about it?" This is my experience, and I sat maybe for 3 or 4 hours listening to people telling me, and you've got to understand, these are usually highly professional people who have lost their jobs to get away from awful situations. You know, I talked to a deputy chief executive of a health trust, a journalist, doctors, academics, your house husband, your housewife, as well. But usually the person who was the main breadwinner for the family was the individual who was getting beaten up, or having, been, gaslighted, and, mental manipulation, emotional manipulation, all these things these are people who come so cut off from society at large that they can't ask for help, or the perspective and the mental health is very much under risk through these actions, the anxiety and depression and loneliness. So if you're cut off from what's happening in the community and can't trust anybody, and your close family, your friends have turned against you because of this, or you've been cut off by your partner from them, you can see how that can make you lonely. And then getting away, to get away from that, how much of a struggle it can be, and what a role technology can actually play in that. And then when I talked about people who've been homeless and how that technology helps re-establish that, but also if you're caring for children and you're the only person there, actually having a point of normality like a television in your room, so you can actually go down with the other mothers and do some washing in the hostel, or use a tumble dryer, or get online to find another job or accommodation. So you're not taking out of the state, but you're actually contributing yet again. You've got to understand what I said about these people very much being the ones who are main breadwinners. Well, where would you invest money to try and get? I would try and get these people back into employment and work, and put the skills back there, make sure they've got stable home lives, make sure the children are not going to fall into the same domestic violence side. The other thing is that we know loneliness is the main cause of people going back to their abuser, or the main cause of people going back to the street. or the main cause. It's always one of the main causes, if not the top main cause. So it's not just a psychological impact, there's huge impacts. And during the pandemic, we're seeing people go from low levels to the sort of medium and high, but also I've seen people who are really tripped over into the high levels without passing through anything intermediate wise. And that means they are very much at risk of it becoming a mental health condition, as we understand anxiety, but it probably underpins and is more important than anxiety. It cross-cuts so much. So it's about removing some of the triggers, but it's also making sure that people are well connected. And I think some of the fantastic things which have come out of the pandemic are, citizen support, which is there, the understanding which we need to get people together, but it has meant the recognition that technology has a real role to play, and the breaking of that negativity of people saying, oh, well, texting is bad for people, social media is bad for people. Well, there's actually no evidence to this. This was all started by an American academic who never will publish her research, who has now been discredited, that screen time was harming children. Well, let me reassure everybody, it doesn't. No more than poison pen letters are, 90% of your posts. They're not. And people have been using these means to be nasty to people, whatever it is, for hundreds of years. People have been just awful at interacting with people. And I don't think it is actually the technology to blame, but this is about social traits and making sure that we don't do it. And I think it's also, there's some responsibility of what we hold up as, your influencers, for want of a better word at the moment. And those have to be really thought about. And that is about, where advertising is, how that is, whether it's in a healthy sphere, whether it's covering other messages. But I know, because it's been studied and looked at, younger people are actually more savvy over what they're looking at and social media than older people. I think you also got the right to turn off and not use it. Harry is an example of that, and Meghan, they've decided not going to take part in social media, and lots of other people have. And I think those are probably very positive messages. You don't need to do this. But we got to look at how supportive it is. And I think the support is very large, it's very well balanced, and we could build more into it, such as the WaveLength Alonia's app and scales of measurement, which would be really, really useful for people. And having an audit of your online as well as your social interactions and everything else. And I would say, as a charity, at the moment, I've not furloughed any of my staff or the people who come to us and work with us, because we had a job to get on with. We need to support our beneficiaries and people out there. And there's never been a more anxious time for people within the UK, and one which WaveLength was really built for. And that will happen, and there's going to be a sea change after this. And I think of all the organisations I've run, large nationals to small locals, WaveLength is definitely a charity, I would say, does what it says it will do. It brings benefit to everybody within the UK because it helps cut costs, helps people that other people won't help, and produces a real answer to need. And I can't think of anything else which I would support more and feel that you should, make a donation to. I think that's what I would leave it as a personal sort of reflection. And what really needs to happen going forward is people can give WaveLength a national voice, and we can help a lot more people.